Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, the show where we break down what it really takes to grow, lead, and win in today's competitive world. I'm your host, Charles Good, and today's episode is a game changer. If you've ever felt stuck comparing yourself to others, if you've been waiting for that one big break to finally unlock your potential, or if you've struggled with setbacks that you felt that they defined you, then today's conversation is exactly what you need. Joining me today is Jake Thompson, a performance coach, speaker, and author of the powerful book, Compete Every Day. Jake's here not only to talk about beating your rivals, but really about beating yesterday's version of you. This episode dives deep into the real drivers of success, effort, attitude, and emotional control. We'll also explore why your greatest competition is the person in the mirror, how to turn failure into fuel, and why consistent, invisible effort beats raw talent every time. So whether you're leading a team or training for your next big challenge, or maybe just trying to grow into your best self, well, this episode is for you, so let's get into it. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. You say there's three things we can control: our effort, our attitude, and our emotions. Rather than focusing on the external competitors, how can that really lead to us achieving our highest potential in both sports and life? Because it's really tough to do. A lot of people assume that they have control over a lot more than they actually do in their life.
Yeah, so the three things always in our control is our attitude, our effort, and our actions. Those three, regardless of what's going on. And the reason it's really important to understand your attitude is a choice, your effort is a choice, and your actions are a choice is because things like our emotions are not, like, you're going to feel an emotion, right? My emotion when my alarm goes off in the morning is I want to keep sleeping. My actions and my choices decide, do I get out of bed and go do the workout I promised I would or not, right? My emotions sometimes stress me out that I don't want to have the conversation with that direct report because I'm scared of how they're going to handle this feedback. But my attitude, being optimistic in that moment, and actions to help improve them are important. And so when we think about it, we have a finite level of willpower, brain power, energy throughout the day. You know, it's why it's easier to turn down that donut at 8 a.m. than it is those wings and beer at 5 o'clock. You're exhausted after a long day. However, being mindful of, if I can only direct my energy or my attitude, my effort, and my actions toward things that help me, then think about how much time is wasted by everyone of complaining, venting, whining, focused on things outside of their control. We've all been there. We've all had those moments where we're griping about something that's outside of our control, and we end up exhausting ourselves looking at something we can't change, replaying a situation we can't improve, everything like that. And so it's vital to understand, like, what can I still do in this moment, right? We lost a big project. Okay, it sucks. Feel the emotion. It's okay. However, what's still in my control? What did we do well in this process? What are we going to do better next time, right? That puts my attitude in a productive state. And I say this for anybody listening. I'm not a always be positive guy. I'm an always be optimistic guy, because optimism is grounded in reality. It understands there's tough situations going on. There's challenges. You're going to lose. You're going to have setbacks. However, accept that they've happened and still ask what's in my control to make change. And sometimes I can't make a change, but what can I learn from this situation for the next conversation, the next relationship, the next go? And so that way we're more intentional with where we direct what we can do more than anything else. And as leaders, we use the example of a thermostat versus a thermometer, right? A thermometer just reads the room and reacts to it. And there's a lot of leaders whose attitudes and their efforts and actions fluctuate based on, do I want to do this? Am I in a good mood today? Did I sit in traffic, or did my kid throw up on me this morning, right? And so their teams are very hesitant to come to them with ideas, with feedback, with anything, because you don't know which version you're going to get. But if you have a leader who's cool and collected, who's always looking to encourage, who will tell you the truth and have a tough conversation with you, but they have your best interest at heart and they're consistent, well, then you feel more psychologically safe to come to them. There's a sense of security in that building that we know is a foundation of high-performing teams. And so it creates a different dynamic. And so one of the exercises I always love to ask people is, when you pull up to your office every day, When was the last time before you ever got out of the car, walked in the front door, say, what's the attitude I want my team to catch today? And just ask yourself. And then walked in and tried to give them the attitude you wanted to catch. Because most times we just go through the motions, we get caught up in the doing, going, that we lack the intentionality of how can I set my temperature, for lack of a better phrase, for everyone else. And so that's a really big component for us, because regardless of what industry and role you're in, there's always going to be things outside of your control, from governmental changes to COVID was a big one, to you name it, right? And we can waste a lot of valuable time and energy focused on those things, or we can ask ourselves, what's still in my control to impact change and take actions toward it?
Another thing that I hear a lot from leaders, and it kind of gives them an out, is saying that, well, they're just better than me because they have more talent, more God-given talent. I just don't have it, so that's why I'm at where I'm at. I love the reframe that you give, because one of your colleagues mentioned that to you, saying, okay, how about let's flip that script? What if you were born with greater God-given talent, but other people were just harder workers? How would that change your mindset, and how has that impacted you as a result of that?
Boy, doesn't that kind of give you a wake up call?
It does.
Like, if what if actually you're actually more talented, you're just lazy? Like, that's kind of the surprise, right? And a lot of that, you think about Angela Duckworth's work on grit, and in her work, she found that in the success equation, talent matters. There's a level of degree. You look at sports, right? Talent matters. However, your effort and consistency are twice as important. And so what's in your control is doubly as important as what's beyond your control, which is talent. And I think for a lot of leaders, when we say, well, they're just more talented than us, what we're trying to do is deflect the responsibility we have with what's in our control. Because if we truly believe we're more talented or equally talented, well, then we have to come face to face with the realization that we're not willing to make the choices to improve our skills, to grow in our career that they are. And nobody wants to come face to face with that. It's a shot to our ego. We feel threatened. And so we do things like self-handicap is the way we put it, right? You don't prepare for that that client pitch or that presentation to your team. You just kind of look over some notes and go in and wing it. So that way, if it bombs, you can always look back, well, I would have done better if I'd prepared, right? You give yourself an out versus, man, I prepared my tail off and it didn't go well. Like, you don't want, because then, oh my gosh, I have to face the reality. Maybe I'm not as good at this, which is actually a good sign, because then you can realize, where can I get better? Let me identify where there's room to grow. And so instead we create excuses and we kind of point it out. And so what I always tell people is, like, always act like you're the most talented person in the room, but that you never want that talent to go to waste. And every one of us that have played sports have had those teammates who you look at and think, God, what I wouldn't give for your size, speed, strength. Like, give me your talent because you're wasting it. And we see it in sports, but it's walking around the corporate workplace every single day. And some people see it and it frustrates you as a leader because you see the potential in people and you just don't understand why they don't rise to it. It's an opportunity for you. But at the same time, I would say there's a lot of leaders who are avoiding the responsibility of doing the extra work by just blaming someone else got the promotion because they're more talented, or their company's better because they're more talented.
And Malcolm Gladwell also argues, right, that the two traits, hard work and relentless hunger, are better predictors of being a great competitor than being born with every natural advantage in the world. A lot of research to support that as well, a lot of books out on that. And also, another surprising thing from the book is that your talent doesn't make you clutch, because you assume that those most talented individuals, you want them to have the ball in the final seconds of the game. But it's your choice to outwork that makes you clutch, not your talent.
Yeah, we talk about in sports, right? The ability, the people that come up clutch in sports is the person who hits the game-winning shot. It's the coworker who steps up during the presentation and delivers. For us, like, we laugh, it's like the speaker who takes the stage and all of a sudden the mic and AV and everything goes out and you never know it. But clutch is a result of preparation and willingness to fail. Like, even the most clutch players we think of in sports still struck out at the end of the game, still missed the game-winning shot. Like, Jordan talks about how many thousands of missed shots he's had. He's missed game winners, but he was willing to take the game winner. And the reason he was willing to is because he took practice shots on practice shots on practice shots. And in our workplace, we think, oh, okay, like, that happens. But most times when the difference between people who we consider clutch and those we don't really comes down to like the preparation ahead of time in that one moment, right? There's people that could look at one Michael Jordan game and think, oh, he's not clutch. He missed a shot at the end of the game. But then you turn on game 6 of the 96 finals and he hits the crossover and the shot on Byron Russell and you're like, dude is clutch, right? It's that one moment. But he just kept taking the shot. And for a lot of us as leaders, the only way you're going to be in position to take the shot is if you're constantly preparing. You got to be ready. And that is what clutch comes down to. It's your willingness to practice and prepare before you have to give a meeting to shareholders and board members, right? Before you have to give that feedback to the team member, before whatever the case may be, it comes down to your willingness to prepare for that moment, because most people wait until the moment to prepare. And the ones we consider clutch, handle pressure, all of these things have actually prepared long before that moment has ever arrived.
Another thing that I find that real competitors do and champions do is they look at failure differently, because failure is not something that's part of me, right? It's an event. It's not the person. It's not who you are. And failing in a pursuit doesn't make you a failure, but a lot of times people internalize a lot of that and they can't overcome that. And they're stuck in the past or stuck in this failure thinking that's just part of who they are.
Yeah, I think that goes back to a couple of things we've talked about today too, of keeping the end in mind, right? If I were to tell you, if you were a sales leader listening to this, and I were to tell you that you're going to get a 999 no's before you get a big yes, then you would try to get those 999 no's out of the way with as fast as possible, right? You would be undeterred, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one. And understanding failures, a lot of time it's part of the process, but it's our ability to review that failure for what we did well and where we can improve that's crucial. There was a research study around the 2004 Canadian swim team, and there was a group of researchers that looked at these swimmers that failed to qualify for the Olympic trials. So imagine this. You've spent your entire life as an athlete training for this moment. You want to represent your country in the Olympics, and you're not good enough. And what they did is they hooked these swimmers up to brain scans, and you would see exactly what you would expect, right? Negative mental emotions, heavy emotions, right? Despair, depression, all of the negativity that surrounds painful moments like that of watching your greatest loss. What surprised the researchers is there were pieces of the brain that control our motor functions that actually started to go dim, which meant there was almost lethargy in their arms. They didn't want to go try again. They didn't want to get back in the water. What's fascinating is they took this same group and another group later and took them through a different exercise. They had them watch the exact same race. Watch your biggest loss. However, we want you to do it objectively. Treat it like a coach. Why did you make this move? Talk to me what you would do differently. How would you turn here? And when the swimmers did this, not only did the negative emotions in the moment lessen dramatically, but they saw those parts in the brain that had kind of gone dark start to fire, which led the researchers to believe that their bodies were wanting to get back in the water and try these new things. And what the study really concluded is that our ability to be resilient requires our ability to review objectively. And so if you can review failure as an event and not an attack on your identity, then you're more willing to seek feedback and review what you did well and where you want to get better next time to then go get better that next time. When we just go from failure to failure to failure, we not only continue to mount negative emotions internally of those experiences and attach them to ourselves, but we don't actually get better. And my thought is if you're going to feel bad and go through the emotional turmoil and pain of something not going your way, you might as well get something good out of it. And so that's where we want to look at failure as learning experiences. They're going to be emotional. It's not going to be fun. But if you can look at it objectively and pull key data from it, then you can use that data to improve the next time.
Also, I love the midnight rule because it kind of gives ourselves a short window, right, to celebrate or mourn in the past. At your deadline, let it go, because the past is a place for learning, not living.
Yeah, I picked that one up from a guy who played baseball in the majors and the minors for years. And he talked about this idea in baseball, the best in the game fail batting 70% of the time. Like your top hitters hit it 3 out of 10 times. And he talked about for him, like whether it's a good game or a bad game, he gives himself until midnight to celebrate or mourn. But at midnight, he has to reset. Because if you go into tomorrow thinking about yesterday's game or today's game, you're not going to be present. You're going to be replaying it. You're going to be out of the moment, and you're not going to be able to perform at your best. And so one of the things we advise is like, how do you create your own version of a midnight rule? For some of my clients, it's like, hey, I'm going to go in the car and I'm going to turn on some Metallica and I'm going to jam one song and go. For some people, they give themselves the day, right? Or they do it till they get home. Like there's some great leaders that have come home and it's awesome to talk to them about it, but like they will jam out something or sit in silence all the way home. They'll process it, they'll go through it, but their job that they've told themselves is when I park that car and get out of that car and go in the house to my spouse and kids, I leave it in the car. And like, I'm going to shake it off regardless of what it is. I'm going to put my focus here. And so that's a really important deal because we know how easy it is to spiral. And if you've ever spiraled, you know, right? This one bad day, oh man, it's just not my week and it's not going to be my year. And then you start to go into this victim mentality and that negativity starts to spiral. And then you start believing in these everything, oh my gosh, I got a red light instead of a green light. The world's out to get me, right? You start looking for evidence that's going to back this. And all it does is damage you versus this sucks. I didn't like it. What's one thing I took away? What's one thing I'm going to do better tomorrow? How can I shift my focus in the next moment? And that's a key for all of us to continue day after day progressing. But it's not easy because if it was easy, everyone would do it. However, little rituals like that start to separate you over time of, man, I was upset for 2 days and now I'm upset for a day and a half. And then I'm upset for a day. And now I can process it and do a walk around my building and let it go before the next one, right? You start to build that endurance and that resilience ability over time by getting in those little reps.
And it reminds us too that what matters most is not what happened in the past, but what you do next. That's so critical and important. And you have a quote by Reid Hoffman in the book saying that your first is going to suck, right? If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've probably launched it too late. And what we really need to do is not focus on the outcomes. We need to embrace the process. It's about choosing to focus on how you can get better each day over the result or worrying about what others might think. And I've heard this before, but I'll say it again because I love what you put in the book about it. Is you can care about what everyone else thinks or you can care about getting better, but you can't do both.
The first is messy. Funny enough, I posted the day we were recording this on LinkedIn, a clip of my very first keynote in 2017 and then one from last year. And it's telling the same story, but it's like night and day different. And the only way you get better is by getting through the mess. And most of the time we won't get through the mess because we're worried about protecting our ego and worried about what everyone else says. And in leadership, the reality is you're never going to make everyone happy. Like you're always going to have somebody upset with you. But are you doing things for the right mission and the right of the group as a whole? And so that's the thing to kind of keep in mind. And so the first time you sit down and try to give someone really good feedback, it's going to be sloppy. First time you try to set boundaries on how you use social media, you're probably going to break them. But the goal is, how do I do it once, get feedback, tweak it, do it better, do it again, do it again, do it again. And then over time, we get to that moment that you and I laughed about earlier. All of a sudden, you're an overnight success. You're this incredible leader. How did you get so good? Oh my gosh, I'm never going to be at the level you are as a leader. You're so good at coaching and developing people. Oh, it must be nice. And you're thinking, yeah, I've spent a decade every single day looking for a way to get better. You can do the same thing.
Well, life really is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you need to not be looking constantly at the finish line. You need to find it, know where you want to finish, but you really need to shift your focus to the one step you have to take today. And I love what you describe in the book. When you're in the marathon, you just need to play tag. Look for those intermediate targets, but keep the overall trajectory in the right direction for that long-term goal, but focus on those intermediate steps.
Yeah, one of the things that in my next book we talk about in our compete framework that we're really working with a lot of leaders and teams on is the M for us is modeling excellence. Like you need to know what world class looks like. So that's the finish line. That's the pinnacle. That's the best organization, the best leader. But where you are today, it can feel overwhelming if you're launching a business and you're looking at Sarah Blakely, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, billionaire. Like, how am I ever going to get there? And so we tell people, like, you got to know what world-class looks like so you have an idea of the standards at that level. But then the most important thing is who's 3% ahead of you. Like close enough to just almost touch, but it forces you to grow to reach them. And for me, it was, running that Vegas half marathon that I was ill prepared for and just getting into a rhythm after 2 miles out of the gate, coming out way too hot, of just playing tag and picking somebody 3 to 5 feet in front of me, catching them, finding somebody else, catching them, finding somebody else. It took my mind off of how far I have to go. And every step person would give me a little bit closer to that finish line. And the same applies to us as a leader. Like if you're in the first year of your leadership journey and listening to this, and you're looking at someone who's been in it for 50, like that's overwhelming of how much they know. But what about the person who was promoted last year? What about shadowing them, learning from them? And then you'll start to find the next level up and the next level up. And so you look for little mile markers, little steps along the way. It's how you run a marathon, right? You run 26 miles, one step at a time. And so you got to get to mile marker 1 before you can get to mile marker 10. And so what you look for is just a little bit ahead of you that's going to stretch you to grow, because what that also does is it keeps you motivated. If the target you're trying to grow into, the skill you're trying to develop is out of reach, it motivates you to reach it, but it's close enough to where it feels attainable. It keeps you in the game versus it's like trying to lose 100 pounds. If you're trying to do it tomorrow, like you're like, why give up? But I'm like, can you lose a pound tomorrow? Could you change one of your meals? Yeah, maybe. Okay, we can do a little bit, half a pound. Like it gives you little mile markers along the way to reach.
And life's going to challenge you, but it's going to be throwing you curveballs every now and then, going to knock you off balance. But winning requires your ability to adjust to the things that you don't see coming, because everyone has those. A competitor chooses, most importantly, to make adjustments over just giving excuses.
Personal responsibility is one of the biggest one, right? And we could all have excuses. And excuses only sound good to you. They sound sweet to you, and everybody else kind of knows them for what they are. And so as a leader, one of the things for us foundationally is you've got to lead yourself. Like that is it. And a big piece of that is owning your position, where you are. You didn't 100% contribute to where you are today. There's things outside of your control that have contributed, but you have a big influence over how your choices you've made, right? Your responses. And especially when you're in a leadership role, we've all been around that person in management leadership who makes excuses, and nobody really wants to follow them. But the person that owns them, sometimes owns them for the team that they shouldn't own them, right? We've seen the quarterback step up and be like, hey, it was my fault I had a bad game, even though it was the receiver running the wrong route or the offensive line who couldn't block is the reason they lost. Great leaders are like that, right? It's not about making excuses, own it. Because really at the end of the day, like you own it, you learn from it, you move on. The excuses don't help us own or improve, because what we're trying to do is deflect. Well, I didn't do anything wrong. It was outside of my control. Versus like, if I own it, I have to admit I had fault in it. If I had fault, then there's an area for improvement, which is what's most important in identifying how we grow and get better.
Well, a story you have in the book with Jim Thorpe, I think really identifies that as well, right? In the 1912 Olympics?
Shoeless, man. Dude, somebody stole the guy's shoe after he'd been dominating them for a couple days, and he still went out and won. Like that's what I love. He had a wrong shoe on and wrong socks and everything. And I think like that's a perfect situation, because as leaders, like you're never going to have an ideal circumstance, right? Maybe you join this new role and man, the market starts to suck in your industry, right? Or you're short staffed or whatever the case may be. Like there's always a reason to make an excuse, or you just find a way to get it done. And I want to follow, and most people all want to follow the person who's like, hey, let's just get it done. And that's a key component of it. But you got to be willing to say, hey, I'm not going to make excuses. I'm just going to take responsibility for my part in it, and let's go figure out how we get better.
Well, and that minimizes the regrets, right? Because the two scariest words in the English language are what if, you mentioned.
What if I'd done differently? What if I'd done better? What if I'd all of those things? And what's interesting is over the last year or so, I've really looked at is like, you can look at what if as the big regret. And most people do this. The only way we use it. What if I'd taken that trip? What if I'd put my hand up for the promotion? What if I'd done those things? Or you can use what if in a positive sense to say, what if it works? What if my team member actually responds to this feedback better, right? What if? So when you look in the future, you can use what if as a failure, right? Everything that could go wrong, or you can use it productively to your favor, right? What if this does work out? But when you're looking back, what if's only filled with regret, because it's always about the thing that you didn't have the courage to do in the moment that looking back, you wish you had.
Well, thank you, Jake, for sharing so many valuable insights and stories with us. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, easiest place to go is competeeveryday.com. Feel free to connect with myself or the team. I spend most of my time on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I'm pretty easy to find. My username is Jake Thompson Speaks. So would love to connect. If anything we talked about here on the show today resonated or you have some questions, drop me a DM or a message. Would love to jam back and forth with you.
Thank you so much. Is there one final insight or call to action you want to make to our listeners based on what we talked today to start them out on this journey of competing better with themselves?
Yeah, the biggest first step I would say is clarify the game. Ask yourself, like, what's the game I care about winning? Who's the competition I'm up against? And to be honest with you, it's not anybody else. It's your bad habits. It's the limiting beliefs. It's the doubts. Like, you want to be aware of where I've got these bad habits. Like, okay, now that I'm aware of them, I can take action to change them. And then last, like, why does it matter to win? What's the game? Who am I competition with? And why does it matter to win? Because then you'll start to reveal, like, what's the underlying why? What's the purpose? What's the thing that fuels me of why I want to win this game? And it could be your kids. It could be doing something somebody's told you can never do. It could be that you love leading and seeing other people grow. Like, whatever it is, the more clarity you get on where you're going and why it matters, the better work you can do.
Wonderful. Thank you again for joining me and sharing your wisdom and stories from your great book, Compete Every Day. Your message is a powerful reminder that greatness isn't reserved for the talented few. It's built by those willing to show up, compete, and grow every single day. Until next time, remember, it's not what you know, but what you do consistently that makes a difference. I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.